right, let's jump into it, eh? Okay. So just review last week. So we're covering the laws of Bein Adam L'Chavero. We finished off Bein Adam L'Atzmo. And yeah, I put forward to you guys the idea that Bein Adam L'Chavero is infinitely complex. That's the Ramban's commentary in the Chumash. And that it can't be fully elaborated. And so what ends up happening is we have certain deraisas, avos reim, halacha b'drachav. These are deraisas that obligate us to be good with other people. What Chazal did is they doubled back and made a whole bunch of derabbanans, outlining. It was almost like they're giving educated suggestions of how you fulfill those deraisas. It's very funny. You don't have anything comparable in halacha like this. So there's an interesting list of derabbanans. Bikur cholim, achnasas kala, and yichum avelim. Those are the derabbanans that Chazal created out of this deraisa. Now what's really interesting is that, whenever you see a list in Mishnayos anywhere, the first question you have to ask is, what's the title of the list? Every list in Chazal has a title. It's like a title of a book. And the lists are like the chapters. So looking at this list, what it's kind of like is that the instruction Chazal is giving is you have to follow the people in your life. You have to follow them from the cradle to the grave.
Why? Bikur
cholim, when mom goes into labor. Achnasas kala, it's a pivotal moment in a person's life when they're going to be, they it's not just bar mitzvah, but they became adult enough to take responsibility for other people. It's a reinvention of themselves. That's actually the different midrashim say one's averas are forgiven on the day they get married. And it's not magic. It's not just because, time to get married, clean slate. But it's such a big deal that you are you just automatically, any normal person would take this moment so seriously that they're taking on the responsibility of being with another human being. Of course they're going to do tshuva. So dramatically so, they become a new human being. And yichum avelim, death, from cradle to grave. That's our basic obligation to everyone else in our lives, is to walk with them on that journey. And it's not a journey we just do willy-nilly, but we have two very important caveats to that. It has to be based on the pasuk v'asita hayashar v'hatov. It has to be good in the eyes of God, and it has to be good in the eyes of man. And it's not just some sort of hedonistic, whatever makes people happy. That's not it. That taking responsibility for other people means you have to get it right, and that there's going to be timelessly correct principles and values to take on in order to take care of somebody else.
What's the title of this lesson?
I don't know yet. I usually title them after I've given them.
Oh, okay. I feel like it makes me know what to expect.
Wait, you said taking responsibility for other people.
That it's not just whatever people like. Bein Adam L'Chavero does not mean if the person wants a candy bar, well, of course you give them a candy bar. It's not that you're making other people happy. It's that you're taking responsibility for other people's lives, and that's incredibly different. You're not satisfying people. Because a lot of times you hear, people will throw around, they'll make the accusation, you're just being rude, Bein Adam L'Chavero, derech eretz, derech eretz, derech eretz. And, well, there is a derech eretz, and that, it's something along the lines of, there are societal assumptions, and societies are different, but the fundamental thread that runs through those differences, let's say, is this idea of no, you're not just making people happy. You're taking responsibility for them. And sometimes that means walking away. So that's one caveat to this. The other is that it's assuming that people are striving to be better. You don't just placate people, give them what they want. You always have to kind of have in mind what you're doing. How is this going to lead them to being better on a basic level? So those are the caveats. It's not just making people happy. Okay.
Wait, why do you want to assume that people are trying to make themselves better?
Because we are.
I know, but why?
I take it as axiomatic.
Oh, you're saying naturally people do.
Oh, I think so. I mean that is the struggle. I mean, that's the fundamental difference between mental health and not being mentally healthy. Is like we're designed to explore, and if you're not, the only way you can explore is risking your safety, risking pushing your comfort zone. And well, if you're not doing that, I mean, that's just being avoidant. Like being avoidant, running away from fear is what makes fear harmful to people. So it's like everyone is, and if they're not, they're hurting themselves. It's on a biological level.
So you're saying it's bad not to question things?
It's bad not to question things. Yes, I would definitely sign on to that one. Okay. Okay. So I want to push forward, but we covered this idea of good in the eyes of Hashem as being received knowledge. And there were two types, chukim, and knowledge you would need more than a lifetime to discover. Those are the two categories I offered you guys. So today what we're going to do is we're going to push forward and talk about what the function of good in the eyes of Hashem is. What does it do? Now, I'm not giving the purpose of the mitzvah. I'm not giving, this is its ultimate spiritual meaning. I am not doing that. I am being a good behavioralist, and I'm only describing, well, if you do X, what does it functionally do in the world? What's its outcome? So this is like not the whole picture, but this is an important picture. What something gives birth to. The apple doesn't fall too far from the tree. You know what I'm saying? So I think the two functions of good in the eyes of Hashem, what that functionally enables is stability in our lives, the ability for us to be individuals and stand up against societal pressures.
Wait, could you repeat the second one?
That's the first one.
Oh.
Stability enables us to be individuals, to stand up against society. And the second function it has is it enables us to trust other people. That it enables us to be willing to literally bind our lives to another human being's life.
And stability lets us trust people?
Both of these are well, I mean, no. I mean,
what are you doing numbers for, like, the 1 and 2 of what?
The function of in the eyes of Hashem. What does in the eyes of Hashem mean? What does being good in the eyes of Hashem do for us? Is what I'm answering.
So you just gave two.
Two things, yeah. Gives us stability and enables us to trust other people. The stability allows us to be individuals with other people. And the trust enables us to join groups, to stop being individuals. So we have this paradox. If you guys have noticed, I like paradoxes. That's kind of my thing. Okay. So let's unpack how does keeping in mind what Hashem thinks is good, how does that give us stability in how we relate to other people? How does that enable us to be good to other people? So I touched a little bit about that already is, well, in life we do confront irritating people. We do that all the time, like no matter how likable you are, there's always going to be that one person who really hates your guts, no matter how hard you try. That's a part of reality. And giving into that makes it easier to deal with those people, but it challenges you in as far as, are you going to hold on to what you believe is fundamentally good? On a large scale example of this, did you guys hear of the Milgram experiments? Milgram was a researcher. It was after World War II, and different social psychologists were trying to grapple with, like, how was it a whole country could try and exterminate a whole other group of people? Like, where did that one come from? So what Milgram did was what his research showed is that people are very willing to listen to authority, and they're going to not question it. They're going to give a lot of power to other people as long as you wear a lab coat. And the way he set up his experiment is, he would bring people off the street. They'd come in and say, okay, well, we want to do this research on memory. And there's someone in another room, and they're hooked up to electrodes. And, and their job is they're going to have to repeat something they needed to memorize. And when they mess up, you electrocute them. That's your job. And there was a dial right in front of the participant. And it was blatantly obvious, like, that it was approaching every time he'd shock the person, the level of electricity was reaching lethal levels. Like, they had, like, skull and crossbones, or, like, they did different things to, like, test it out, or, like, do not shock person, risk of death. It was in front of the person that they're going to cause another person to die. Now, there was no one in another room, and there was an actor who, whenever, the button was pushed, he would scream, and that was his job, and they were having laughs in the other room. But what came out of the experiment was people will follow orders. They want to satisfy experts. They want to satisfy people who they think are better than them, and they'll give up their values. They'll end up killing people.
People want to sacrifice their values for people like them. Yeah.
That they'll belong ultimately. That's how important belonging is to people. And what they did notice, the reason why I bring this up, is that they did find that people who were more religious were less susceptible to ending up killing people, although they did. And I don't want to paint a rosy image,
but less susceptible. If
they were less likely to do it. Like, the more religious you were,
but they still did it.
Not as likely. Yeah, we're playing with statistics now, but yeah, they weren't as likely to go forward and do it. And what this experiment illustrates, and other research in moral psychology shows, is that one thing that religion does is it does increase love of people that belong to your group. And it protects you from hating people who are outside your group. And the reason is because religion gives you a map of meaning. It allows you to, in a certain respect, stay safe. Because the way fear works, I thought this was pretty cool. There's no on button to fear, because fear is always on. The way that the limbic system, which governs fear response, the way that works is it suppresses fear, but it's like your starting position is to be afraid. The first behavioral psychologists, they thought, no, well, you could stimulate fear. If you put something scary in front of a mouse, he'll freak out. But no, the way fear works is whenever you're confronted with something unknown, you automatically stop suppressing fear. And as you explore that unknown thing, well, then fear is reduced. Well, the nasty thing about fear is the more that you're afraid of something, the less likely it is you're going to catch detail. We talked about it in the right hemisphere of the brain. It looks for broad, holistic patterns. So you're going to miss all the detail, and you're trying to quickly assess what's in front of you to survive, essentially. So you miss a lot. So wouldn't it be really great if there was some way of staying in known territory? Well, that's what halacha does. Having that map of meaning allows a person to be confronted by the unknown, but you end up being able to have one leg still in the world of the known. How do you behave That's more or less what we do when we're trying to figure out, well, how do I handle something that's causing me fear? How do I behave? What do I do? Physically, what do you do? Well, that's what halacha provides. It provides an answer of what to do. So when you're confronted by fear, when you're confronted by, this sort of, the scary man in the white lab coat telling you to execute somebody, your fear response is much less, and you're better able to freely choose what to do.
Your response is much less when you're religious? Is that what you're saying?
It's much less when you'll need two parts. It's not just being religious, although that helps, but it's knowing what to do in unknown situations. Because not every religion is going to tell you what to do. Christianity doesn't tell you what to do. Christianity says suffer living, and then you get a portion of the world to come. As long as you believe in Jesus, it'll be sorted out. Don't worry. That helps a little bit, but knowing what to do helps you not be afraid. You kind of have this with PTSD, complex trauma. Something happens in a person's life which is completely unknown to them. It's like it just shocks them out of their reality. And usually they start out with a fairly simplistic worldview. The world is good and I am a good person. And all of a sudden something horrendous happens and they learn they did something bad. Maybe they're not such a good person. Or maybe the world is not so good. And it's because they only have black and white, good and bad. The moment that's challenged, it destroys their world. You have to then, in a literal sense, rebuild everything you've ever experienced. Because that one moment, it's not just you had a nice life and all of a sudden that one moment just popped up and that's hard. It's hard enough. If that was the case, it's hard enough. But it's usually that one thing makes you question everything that's come before. How could it be I thought the world was good? How could it be that I thought I was good? How did I end up here? Who am I? All of a sudden, when you're confronted with, for lack of a better term, pure evil, you end up not knowing who you are. That's the scariest thing imaginable.
That's if you don't have religion to ground you?
Yes.
But would you say that people in the Holocaust that questioned just didn't have that strong of a foundation to begin with? Or it was just circumstances that, because it was such an unthinkable thing that was happening to them, that it really caused people to kind of...
Oh, I'm sure both, yeah. It would happen, this is something that Viktor Frankl, I mentioned him in the first class, that he testified to, is that the people who had meaning in their life, people who did more or less, have some sort of moral compass to guide them, they survived. And people who didn't have that map of meaning were less likely to survive. Okay. So that's stability. Knowledge of halacha grounds us and allows us to stand, keeps one foot in the known world we occupy, and allows us to step into the unknown. This, by the way, is I mentioned this in my last class, but it's worth repeating. This is the same idea why a person should not learn Kabbalah until they've learned all of Shas, all of halacha. Kabbalah is jumping into the unknown. It is incredibly abstract. There's nothing more unknown than Kabbalistic ideas. And, well, if you're going to do that without a firm basis of halacha under your belt, you do it at your own peril. It will either, best case scenario is it will make you weird. Worst case scenario is it will destroy you. And I've seen both. So, usually what people do nowadays when they teach Kabbalah, they're not really teaching Kabbalah. It's like it's
you're not supposed to learn until you're 40 and married,
and gone through Shas, gone through halacha. You have a firm base. You have firm ground in reality, in the known. So it's like a lifeline that keeps you from just floating away into the mystical realms of who knows what. This is also the idea of the four chachamim who went into Pardes. Three of them, what was it? One committed suicide, one became an apikoros, and one went crazy. And these were Tanaim. These were Chazal. That's what Kabbalah does to you if you don't have a firm lifeline to the known. It was only Rabbi Akiva who was able to make it out alive. I've been playing around with this idea, and I don't know where I'm going to go with it, but I think it's kind of, it gives me pause to say only 3 of them died, because Rabbi Akiva's story ends rather tragically, that when the Romans outlawed teaching Torah, his connection to Torah was so strong. His life experiences, which included going through pardes, what that led him to was sacrificing his life. So it's like, did anybody really make it out alive going through pardes? But man, if you're going to go out, that's one really great way to go out. That's sacrifice for a greater good. Like, that's pretty good. Kiddush Hashem, I wouldn't turn that one down. It's a challenge.
Are there a lot of people that practice Kabbalah or learn Kabbalah like truly that aren't absolutely insane?
Yeah, and they don't teach it.
Because fear of...
Because they'll make other people...
Because it's usur. It's forbidden. Right, exactly. Yeah. So whenever you hear someone teaching Kabbalah, okay, they're not a real Kabbalist. It's like, okay, that's funny.
There was a Kabbalah class last year.
Yeah, we had a Kabbalah class about being possessed and how to exorcise a demon and how you become susceptible to possession, which is like one of them is if you don't say brachos. So then everyone's like, oh my god, we're gonna be possessed. So everyone's
or like it comes more like Tuesdays and something, right?
I think it's Shabbos or
Fridays.
Kabbalah cannot be used as a threat.
I don't think
I don't care. I don't care what that's dangerous. Like, all right, whatever.
So then where does that come from if it's not brought, if no one's allowed, if it's like such a
hard thing to teach?
Yeah, if it's
what I'm saying is what usually what people do is they're not really teaching Kabbalah. Like they do it as like to attract interest to the class. But
I feel like there's different levels.
Also, Kabbalah light, keeping it more superficial.
And you can talk about the 10 Sfirot, for example, that's not so deep, but it's Kabbalah.
Yeah. Read the Ramban's introduction to the Chumash and get back to me. Yeah. Okay. So number 2, the second function of being good in the eyes of Hashem was it enables trust. Now, I wanted to kind of use as a foil, to bounce this idea off of, are the new atheists. People like, you've heard of Richard Dawkings and Sam Harris, people like this. They're popular authors, popular biologist, and I think he's a computer scientist, if I'm not mistaken. But he's a knowledgeable guy, Sam Harris. They basically put that. Richard Dawkins does it best in his book, The God Delusion, where he basically describes religion as a parasite. He says it's a evolutionarily based parasitic malfunction. That's a quote.
Nice.
He says that it's a bunch of irrational rituals that are costly, they're inefficient, and because they're inefficient and cost loads of people money and don't make sense, they are irrational, and that's why they're parasitic.
What makes him think that?
Well, he is one of the premier evolutionary biologists that is alive today. He's not a dumb guy, but a very. I don't want to make I'm not making a character attack because it's not fair to do that. If an idea is good, it doesn't matter who said it. At the same time, ideas come from people that have a certain lens, and he had a very hard background. So it's something to listen to an argument, but also take that into account. But again, not a character assassination. That's not my point. But very, very interesting idea. But it's not true. Moral psychologists like Schweder or Jonathan Haidt, I mentioned him a little while back, show that's just simply not true. And that, in fact, what functionally speaking, what religion does is it enables trust. It gets around what they call the free rider problem. Well, the free rider problem is basically, people work together in groups and, everybody pitches in and, helps out. And there's always that one guy who doesn't. Whenever you do in school when you would, do a paper with a group, there was always that one guy who let me know when it's done.
Put my name on it.
Put my name on it. Well, he's a free rider. That would be who we're talking about. And it's incredibly costly that, the use of goods and services everybody else creates, well, the free riders use. And they don't use it so nicely. And it's a misuse of public property. It's very costly. So, well, how do you get around the free rider problem? How do you convince
who are the free riders in this scenario?
people who are not contributing to the greater good of society?
Which is religion, or
No, just saying an individual. I'm saying what I'm explaining is how religion actually solves this problem.
okay.
Because what ends up happening is, well, again, this is not the purpose of religion, but this is a function that it allows to come about, is that it enables trust between people. The fact that we are on a shared journey, that there's a common goal that we all belong to. What that does is it minimizes our individual self. We're a part of a greater good. And it just makes life just way less of a problem having to worry about free riders because, well, they're much more likely to join the group. It's something worth joining. And a good example of this would be the Jews in the diamond business. If you look at all other diamond dealers around the world, they have incredible overhead. They invest lots of money making sure that the diamonds aren't stolen, it gets to where they need to get to. That's a big waste of money. But the Jewish diamond dealers, well, we're all Jewish, we all kind of trust each other, we all know God's watching, and they're just less likely to steal, by a lot less likely to steal. So religion has this binding effect that it offers. And there's a lot of research that shows across the board that religion enables better neighborhoods, better citizens, people who are more generous with their time, people who are more generous with their money, people who are more active in community life. It makes people want to invest in other people because it's easier for them to have empathy for others. They see themselves in the other person and vice versa. So it's not just a bad idea. It's a very bad idea, these new atheists, that it's a parasite and waste money. It's no, fair enough you're smart, but guess what? You got it wrong. It actually does the opposite of what they claim religion does. Now, this is not like a proof for God. This is not the reason we have the mitzvahs, but that's a pretty nice outcome. You know what I'm saying? That's nice to know. And fundamentally, it's because people we're what's called being eusocial, where we're not individuals. There are certain creatures that exist on this planet that they don't have a sense of individuality, like ants. Ants are a great example. Termites, they're a great example.
So just compare it to ants and
people. There's there's a medrash that says you should work like an ant. Well, there's something to that. Well, how does an ant work? You do a better job in life by becoming a superorganism. That's what being eusocial is. It's you think about all the different cells in your body. Well, each one's a living creature from a biological perspective. What makes you up? Bazillions of living cells.
Wait, when you say being a what? You do a better job in life
being a superorganism. So it's just like you have a bunch of cells that make you up, and each one is a living creature. Well, you're a living creature too in the body of the Jewish people. This is the basis, I think, of the idea of why it is someone can be yotzei another person in Kiddush. Why is it you can have a chelik in a person's schar? They did something good, you helped out a little bit, or maybe you should have given tochacha and you get a little bit of their onesh. It's because the Jewish people are a superorganism. Those are the halachic nafkaminas. The time we have, I kind of go on a little bit of a tangent. Because without trust, that's pretty bad. That's an understatement saying that's bad.
What's bad?
Lacking trust in society. And this, unfortunately, is a matzav that we currently are living out.
Talking about anti-Semitism? Or...
No, worse than that. I'm talking anti-human. No, this is worse than anti-Semitism. This is the first time in human history where the idea of God does not bind people. We're living in a time they call it postmodernism. Everybody can create their own truth, and that's very much the zeitgeist of this particular time in history, the flavor of this moment in history. And there were two. One was a philosopher and one was a psychologist, who basically predicted the horrors of the 20th century. One was Nietzsche. Nietzsche. He was a moral philosopher. His claim to fame was the declaration that God is dead. And a lot of people, if you've heard this quote, a lot of people actually use this quote as kind of like, getting back to the new atheists. They use it as like a rally cry. God is dead and, long live reason or something like this. But Nietzsche did not mean it that way. What Nietzsche was actually writing about when he was describing this idea of the death of God within European society, was that God was something that bound everybody together and gave people's life meaning. Now, okay, forget that is Christianity Bodhisattva, maybe it is, maybe it isn't, but I can't think of a single Rishon who would not at least admit, the world got better, that the Jewish idea of a single God spread across the whole planet like a wildfire. Rav Hirsch has a lot of good things to say on this. Now, the Rambam also describes this idea. That was good for people, But I think it was good because of this point, not just because it's a correct idea, which in of itself is good, but it enabled people to know how to live and gave them a purpose and bound people together. And so what Nietzsche was actually prophesizing was he was saying, look, okay, Christianity is failing. And what people are going to have to do in order to survive, literally survive, is they're going to have to create their own moral code, and they're going to have to basically become super philosophers in order to literally survive. And in his writings predicts how, most people are not going to be able to do this, and predicts the horrors of the 20th century. He literally names communism as being an idea 100 years before it became a serious political philosophy. Named it as being one of the primary causes for the future death that will be seen. It was reading his words are they're shockingly accurate. And that's exactly what happened. 600 million people buried underneath the value of fairness gone wrong. Buried under a lack of meaning of people trying to figure out how are they going to work themselves out in the world? Well, man, were they not bound together? If nothing else, this really, really good idea, of social, this good social idea of communism ended up dividing people more than anything. And that's something worth to stop and ponder, is a lot of really smart people got together and thought, well, what's the best way to make a paradise on earth? What's the best way for people to trust each other and work towards a common good? Great, we got communism. And what did it exactly do? It exactly did the opposite.
Did they have good goals? Did they have a good intention?
Originally, but whenever you do social engineering, number one, never do that, because you do not know what you're creating. Yeah. But when you're doing social engineering here, well, there's too many factors to take into account. So communism works really well in a family. You have to make sure that you treat all your kids fairly. That's a good idea. It works really nice in a family, but as soon as it gets big, there's too many factors at play to consider.
Did it work well for a little bit?
No, it fell apart almost immediately.
Let's say the Holocaust, it worked well for the Nazis for a little bit before it went wrong.
It didn't work for the Nazis either. They immediately started exterminating people who were mentally ill, and they moved on up. That was, right. They thought that they were doing good. And it was because they're trying to do social engineering, they're disconnected from what fundamentally binds people, religion. Well, they end up just murdering everybody. Right. And the suicidal tendency at the end, it was far based on their own beliefs. They thought it was better for the Third Reich to die in flames and everybody, die fighting than, okay, sorry guys, we give up, redo. It's That's what we lose when we lose religion. But I wanted to end on this note that, that it, again, with the new atheist beliefs that are very much in our society today. And, we are in many ways, I don't use the word lightly, victims of this revolution in society, the death of God that Nietzsche declared. I mentioned the second one, Carl Jung also described. In his works, he describes this problem as there's a very thin layer between social insanity. There's not so many people standing between that and things being okay. Around the same time, we were seeing as these social changes were going on, there was another researcher, Emily Durkheim, and what he found, he had a really nice way of thinking about it.
Emily
It was
is a boy?
Yeah, he was French, so French do things differently. He called this process anomie, which roughly is Latin, which means normalization. Is that when we cease to try and transcend our reality, when we cease trying to be bigger than what we are, when we cease exploring and trying to live in the moral truths that we have, what ends up happening is life becomes normal. Like, that's a kick in the gut. And what he found in his research was the more normal life is, the less people are happy. And I'm not trying to sell happiness. Like, life is not...
What does he mean by normal?
Irreligious. I'm not selling happy. Like, this is not a pleasure principle. But people find less satisfaction and meaning in their life. There is an increase of suicide. His work on that was revolutionary, bringing that out. And it happens to be, in the 1960s, there was also another wave where normalness started to increase also, and we saw hikes of suicide. And we see it today. That's something which is, again, I can't say it's proven, but man, it's a strong correlation. Like, it's too freaky to ignore, let's say, that these things go together. And that what ends up happening is that those societies that become irreligious become the least effective societies on earth. So just kind of recapping, again, the message I wanted to kind of get across today was this idea that being good in the eyes of God enables you to be an individual, because it gives you a backbone. It allows you to stabilize your life, to confront fear, and to confront it intelligently so you can make good choices. By having a halachic map of meaning, that's what you get out of it. And it also enables trust. It enables people to see that we are similar, we have a common goal, and that this common goal demands that we transcend our normalcy to be better than what we are. That's what it means to be good in the eyes of God in how you treat other people. Thank you. All right, guys.